Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team? We've got you covered. Traditional league, dynasty league, PPR league, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello there, everybody, and welcome to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, as always, Marcus Vargas, and today, as always, we have a packed show for you guys. Now, today, I want to start off the show by talking about America's favorite team, or as I like to call them, America's favorite team to hate, the Dallas Cowboys. Why do I want to talk about them, you might ask? Well, if you're unaware, you might be living under a rock or aren't really that much of a sports fan. Dak Prescott is expected to sign his franchise tender. Now, this really stirs the pot. This really shakes up, the narrative and the story we've been following for quite some time. And I'll admit here, this is not how I thought that this was going to go. The reason why this is not why I thought it would go this way is because should Dak Prescott, this be accurate news and Dak Prescott actually signs this tender, he can no longer hold out. And this was reported by Adam Schefter, very reliable source. And after he signs the franchise tag, the two sides will have until July 15th, the deadline, to agree on a long-term deal. Now, well, I didn't expect it to go this way because I think Dak Prescott has received more than fair offers already. We've discussed the offer on previous episodes. I thought it was plenty for him. It would make him the highest paid quarterback on a yearly salary basis, and I couldn't understand why he wouldn't sign it, right? And well, I guess I could. He wanted more money in in his fifth year. He knows that by then $45 million a year is probably going to look like chump change. Excuse me. And he, I guess he feels that the Dallas Cowboys owe him money. A lot of people do feel that way. And I guess it's understandable to see why they think that way. But I just want to, if I have to take a final stance here, Dak Prescott doesn't deserve more than what he was offered. And here's why. When you watch the Dallas Cowboys play, even when you watched them last season, do you ever feel like that team is Dak Prescott's team? When I watch the Dallas Cowboys play, the way I watch football games, a lot of times, especially, teams with great quarterbacks, I always eye in on a certain player, and it's usually the quarterback. On the Dallas Cowboys, I feel like I'm not super focused on the quarterback, and it's not just a thing like, I'm hating on the Cowboys, because when I watch Tom Brady play, I stare at him as well. It's the way he moves around the pocket. It's, watching his technique, the way he lets go of the ball. I just love watching, quarterbacks play. But when I watch the Dallas Cowboys, I'm more watching everyone. I'm more giving a lot of my attention to Ezekiel Elliott and giving my attention, to the receivers. And now I know, understand, when we watch football games, from that spectator view on, CBS, NFL, what have you, the receivers go out of frame. I typically tend to watch the receivers. They go out of frame. I look at Dak Prescott a bit. I see what Zeke's doing. But if it's, a handoff, clearly I'm looking at Zeke. But I never feel like I'm constantly gravitated towards Dak Prescott the way I am to other quarterbacks. I don't know if you guys understand what I'm saying. It feels like to me other quarterbacks have a star power or, they just catch my eye more than Dak Prescott does. And I'm not saying he's a bad quarterback by any means. We know the stats last season: 65.1 completion percentage, 4,902 yards, 30 TDs, 11 picks, 99.7 passer rating. Now, excuse me. I do want to note, last season was the first time Dak Prescott even cracked 4,000 yards. It's the first time he passed 23 passing touchdowns. And it was one of his better passer ratings, but it wasn't even his best passer rating of his career. So these are things that the Cowboys are looking at, right? And they look at why he has so many stats last season. We all know they were playing from behind in a ton of those games. You know, if you look at, you know, these stats, do you see a team that's 8-8? You know, do you see a team that's, you know, was barely scraping to make the playoffs? Everyone felt like they were severely underperforming. The defense was playing bad. You know, when you see those kinds of stats, you know, you think you're looking at a team with a bunch of wins, you know, a playoff team. It's sort of the Jameis Winston effect. Now, Jameis Winston, of course, 30 interceptions, right? But he had 33 touchdowns, 5,109 yards, and a 5.3 touchdown percent ratio. Basically, that's, you know, percent of touchdowns thrown when attempting a pass, basically. Touchdowns per pass attempts, basically. That's what it is. It's actually one of the higher ones. If you look at it like this, Jameis Winston, and I understand he doesn't have that many pass attempts because he gets picked off so often, but he was an offensive machine. If he limits the turnovers, he would be considered one of the elite quarterbacks of the NFL. Another thing I want to note when looking at these stats, you know, numbers can lie. You know, I do want to note that numbers, they can lie because they don't give you the full story. You know, if a guy has a 700-yard game, you know, oh, actually, that'd be absolutely insane. But, you know, with Dak's stats, the numbers don't tell you that they were constantly playing from behind. He wasn't putting them in positions to win. You know, he wasn't the most clutch last season. You know, it's just, we have to look at it like that. Yes, he had a solid completion percentage, great touchdown to interception ratio, but it's just, you have to look at it with further detail. You know, to me, I would rather have Carson Wentz's 4,039 yards, his 27-7 touchdown and picks, because I felt like he could do more for his team than Dak Prescott could. I mean, we saw it. We saw Carson Wentz take his team to the playoffs with no help. We saw Dak Prescott with Ezekiel Elliott, Amari Cooper. People talk about Amari Cooper being one of the best route runners in the game. Talk about him as an X factor in Dallas. You know, when he came, all the offense just changed. It shifted. It's great now. Michael Gallup, up and coming star. Randall Cobb's not a bum by any means. Just so you guys know, you know, he's not a bum. Of course, you know, he's not there anymore, but, you know, Jason Witten was on the team. Not, you know, he wasn't great, but, you know, it's not like Dak Prescott didn't have help and, you know, this was magical and we couldn't believe he was doing these things. That's a high-powered offense with, you know, great players at the skill positions, and he had many more weapons than Carson Wentz, yet couldn't find a way to win 9 or 10 games to win the division. The NFC least is the easiest division in football right now. And he couldn't find a way to win to win that division. And I understand, you know, yes, you know, excuse me. He's won the division before, you know, 2-time Pro Bowler. You know, he hits these career highs, but the Cowboys simply just waited too long to get to do this deal, and it's on them. They can only blame themselves because they should have done this deal earlier. It would have cost them a lot less money. They wouldn't be, you know, entrenched in this drama, and they would have, you know, yeah, the main thing, they wouldn't have to pay so much darn money. Now, he's signing the franchise tag. That's worth $31.4 million, and I wonder if this signifies a sort of shift in his tone. The sort of a shift in the tone of his agent and all that, because it just, to me, it seemed that they were really staunch. They were really stuck on this, you know, no, we want this much money in the 5th year, or we want this much money per year, and it felt that they were going to hold out. And now I don't know what to believe, because now we know that the holdout is basically impossible now. Right? He's obligated to report to training camp now. He can't hold out. It doesn't have that sort of leverage anymore. So I think Dak Prescott sort of put a nail in his coffin there. Because now the Cowboys know, well, he's playing for us, right? And so I think we might get into a Kirk Cousins situation here. I think this might end up being a franchise tag trade sort of situation. I don't think at this point Dak Prescott is going to be a Cowboy for a very long time. It feels like, they're just mutually agreeing to this right now. He'll take his $31.4 million and he'll get out of there. That's what that feels like to me. So I feel like I hope he's not giving in, because when you take these very hard stances, the Le'Veon Bell sort of thing, you can't give in, because then you just look silly. You end up taking less money when you should have taken what was offered to you, right? So, like when we saw Le'Veon Bell hold out, after his time with the Steelers, he posted on Twitter, a fan asked him to come play for the Jets. I think the fan said something along the lines of, $60 million a year, or $60 million cash for you to come play for the Jets. And he said that's not enough to go run with them boys. He replied to the fan, said that. We all know where Le'Veon Bell is. We all know the contract number. So it's just sort of crazy. And also that contract was reportedly less than what the Steelers had offered him. So, hey, Melvin Gordon, same scenario here, right? He was holding out. A little different though, because Melvin Gordon, of course, I don't think a lot of people were on the side of Melvin Gordon or expected him to get the huge deal he was looking for. It kind of feels like, Jadeveon Clowney situation where, they put a number out there, but it's really only a number that them and their agents want. It's sort of ridiculous, but yeah, I don't, just to get back on track here. I don't like the fact that, Dak Prescott signed the franchise tag. It means he's not holding out. He's sort of, giving in a bit, but I'm going to look at it from the standpoint that I don't think he's going to give in. I think this is a sort of the bridge is now burnt sort of thing. I don't think, it's a hard feelings kind of thing. I just think they cannot agree on a number. Of course, they have some time still, but it's just, they've got less than a month. They've had a bunch of time already, and I think it's just only going to get more tense. I don't think, at this point, Jerry Jones gives in for any more money. He's already announced he's signing the franchise tag. I think that's it. I think that's where the saga ends, guys. Unfortunately, because I thought this would get a little bit more juicy. But hopefully it just means that Dak Prescott is going to move somewhere else. And I think the Cowboys prepared for that with the signing of Andy Dalton. Not that he's Dak Prescott, but I think he's certainly capable of leading that team to the playoffs. Let's not forget he did play in a playoff game with the Bengals. Not that they had much success, but he has been to the postseason with the Bengals. So Andy Dalton is certainly capable of taking that team to the playoffs. Because when you look at that team on paper, Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, Michael Gallup, just the skill position players. Ezekiel Elliott. Oh no, I'm blanking on Tony Pollard as a backup. He looked nice last season. Tony Pollard as a backup. You gotta wonder, what this team could look like. Should Dak Prescott leave? Would they be horrible? I don't necessarily believe so. So that's my take on it, guys. That's my final take on it. I just wanted to give you guys that because honestly, Dak Prescott is not worth $40 million a year in any year. Not right now. You don't give. It's hard, right? Because when you talk about the past, they didn't give him the contract then, so they kind of owe him money for that. But they wouldn't have paid him $40 million back then, right? It wouldn't have been worth that much. So to say, they owe him money from before, they should be giving him this money. It doesn't work that way. It didn't happen. It stinks. They should have given him his contract earlier, but it seems to me almost impossible that Jerry Jones would sort of justify, okay, let's pay him this because we didn't pay him this before, so let's give him this absurd Patrick Mahomes level contract for a guy that's nowhere near the player that Patrick Mahomes is, right? So, of course, yes, okay, you can look at the stats, and I guess technically, Dak Prescott had a better statistical season than Patrick Mahomes, but who would you rather have on your team as your quarterback? That's all I gotta say. We all know that numbers lie a little bit. Pat Mahomes, of course, he had less yards. He had 4,031. Only 26 TDs, but only 5 picks. Remember, he missed several games, though. We know those stats would have been way higher had he not missed those games and been fully healthy all season. We'll see it next year, of course. no injuries occur. Hopefully, we pray for that. But Dak Prescott's just not that guy. And I'm sorry for any Cowboys fans that are listening. He isn't a $40 million man. That's Patrick Mahomes. That's reserved for those guys that have that, they win Super Bowls. Dak Prescott to me doesn't feel like an elite guy. He is a good quarterback, though. I will give it to him. He's a very good quarterback, but he's just not in that echelon yet. I'm not saying he'll never be there. He's not there yet. Last season was a great showcase. Hopefully he can keep that up. Should his production dip at all? No, you can case the extension out the window. So keep your eyes and ears open for that. I think the saga is certainly not over. Of course, it'll reignite as the season goes on. Should Dak Prescott start playing poorly? Andy Dalton controversy. So I think it'll get interesting with Dak Prescott in Dallas. I honestly, just to give one final opinion here, I didn't see this coming. I didn't think Dak Prescott would be the sort of guy to take the stance, to take the holdout. He seems very, pro-Cowboy, Cowboy-esque, and, he seems very loyal. And I'm not saying he's not loyal for not taking a pay cut at all. That's not what I'm saying. I don't think, he should be taking pay cuts. But he is getting a little out of hand with how much money he's asking for. But with that, guys, we'll go into our first break. Yeah, I don't know if you guys noticed that we've got a new format. Now we'll have 15-minute sections rather than 10 minutes. So we're going to have 4 15-minute segments now with less breaks and more talking before those breaks. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after the short break.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. We move on here, guys. With this segment, I want to take some time. I want to talk about sort of some, pretty big news that came out recently. You guys have, probably most definitely heard it was breaking news, but one of the NFL's best safeties has requested a trade. Jamal Adams, guys, of the New York Jets, as you all know, once out of New York yet again. Now, basically, what we know is, Jamal Adams has told the New York Jets he wants to be traded. That's basically what's been reported. Reasons, cited reasons being contract negotiations have been rough, and also, it feels like, at least in my opinion here, it feels like that team doesn't want him to be sort of a cornerstone of the franchise. He's been one of the best safeties in the league. Now, of course, I don't believe that he is, the best safety in the league. I don't believe he's, as good as Tyrann Mathieu. I actually agree with, Shannon Sharp made a lot of solid comments about how, Tyrann Mathieu is a much more versatile player than Jamal Adams. Jamal Adams is very, very good. He's more of a, tackler, very good against the run, whereas Honey Badger can do it all. But Jamal Adams is a very, very good player. I think he's a very good example of someone who could be a young leader. He has fire. He wants to win. And I think the New York Jets don't want him to be that leader, right? He's not, essentially, when, should Sam Darnold step it up a bit and his time comes to get an extension, they won't hesitate, right? The quarterback position is one of value. It's, you're supposed to be a leader if you're the quarterback. And I think, they're not a fan of Jamal Adams, plain and simple. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. The New York Jets asking price right now has been reported to be 2 first-round picks. That's basically what everyone's thinking here. That is essentially going to be the price for him. Now, it's the general consensus, at least I believe, that no team should pay 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams, and that's why the situation is tricky. We saw the Rams pay 2 first-round draft picks for Jalen Ramsey very, very recently, and that didn't change much in Los Angeles. They didn't make the playoffs, and while he's a great player, lockdown corner, does his position, plays his position very well. I would also argue, that cornerback is a more valuable position than safety, and they paid 2 first-round picks for probably one of the best, arguably the best corner in football. Right, so, and I don't think, you're necessarily getting arguably the best safety in football, right? I think, I think Earl Thomas, Tyrann Mathieu, people would take them over Jamal Adams pretty frequently. Now, excuse me, with no teams, while I do say that no team should be paying 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams, we've seen people overpay for players all the time, so I wouldn't be surprised if it did happen. The reason why I would be surprised if I saw a trade happen, yes, I would be surprised if a trade happened, is because a team not only has to pay 2 first-round picks, but they have to sign Jamal Adams to a mega deal. It's what he wants. He wants to be a big part of a franchise for a very long time, and he wants to be paid like the best safety in football. And that is a big burden to carry on. Now, yes, of course, a team's, desperate for a leader, a culture changer, a solid young player, an elite young player. Yes, they could do it, with the salary cap space, but it's one of those where is the value in that, kind of, because, if you get Jamal Adams and he doesn't make a Pro Bowl, he plays even just slightly less than elite, you overpaid for him by miles. And then if he just continues to be Jamal Adams, well, I guess you paid for Jamal Adams, right? There is no situation here where a team makes out, that was such a good, pickup, you got Jamal Adams for this price, or you got Jamal Adams, yeah, you lost this, but you got him, and he's, we know what he is, right? It's not like, this is like a steal or anything like that. You are paying a lot for Jamal Adams. The 2 draft picks is a lot of draft capital, plus whatever he wants for his extension. Some team is going to pay a lot of money, sort of like Khalil Mack, right? The Khalil Mack trade was insane, a lot of first-round picks, a lot of money. It's going to be similar to that. And, while Khalil Mack is an absolute beast, what are the Bears doing? Right? And so, they potentially could have given up their quarterback of the future. Maybe they wanted to replace Mitchell Trubisky, or they could have drafted a replacement for Mitchell Trubisky, but they can't, or they haven't been able to do so because of the loss of the first-round picks. So, I don't think Jamal Adams is worth the 2 first-round picks plus that mega extension that he wants. But he's a very good player, and he gave a list of teams that he would welcome, he would welcome offers. Well, not that, he controls the trade, but he would want to play for. And these teams are the Baltimore Ravens, Dallas Cowboys, Houston Texans, Kansas City Chiefs, Eagles, 49ers, or the Seahawks. Now, there was one other team that he mentioned that he would be open to playing for, and I'm actually blanking. I think it was on Twitter or somewhere. There was one other team that he said he would also welcome playing for them. I'm blanking on it. Sorry, guys. But anyway, back on track. These are all clearly winning teams. It feels very bandwagonish or I guess front-runner-ish. that he lists all these. He's like, I want to play for these teams. These are all playoff teams. These are all teams that win. That's it. It's kind of funny to think about. Because it makes sense. You want to win games, but it's funny to hear a professional elite player go, I want to go to where those guys are winning, the winning teams, so it's easier for me. But it's kind of interesting. But anyway, these are all, honestly, all of these teams could use his talents. All of these teams certainly would like to have Jamal Adams on their team. Do they all, are they all desperate for him? Not necessarily, but I don't think he'll land on any of these teams. A lot of these teams have a lot of players to pay, especially the Kansas City Chiefs. I could probably rule out the Kansas City Chiefs right now because still have to sign Patrick Mahomes. Still have to, get Chris Jones' deal done. I don't think they're going to want to bring in a guy, get a deal done with him while two other keys of the franchise, cornerstone pieces of the franchise, don't have their money yet, right? So I guess the team that I would see, and a lot of people are agreeing here, a lot of experts and analysts are saying the Philadelphia Eagles is the most likely fit for him, right? They need a safety. Malcolm Jenkins is out of there. He's back with the Saints. And he would definitely bring an edge to that secondary and definitely fit well in the scheme. He's an excellent safety, like I said, excellent box safety, gonna go up, tackle guys, be physical, great player. But, all these other teams, the Baltimore Ravens, of course, that'd be insane. Him and Earl Thomas. The Cowboys desperately need a safety. It's funny, another thing the Eagles and Cowboys can fight over. The Houston Texans, I have no clue why he would want to go play with them. I'm going to be honest here. Bill O'Brien doesn't have the best reputation. The Texans just lost such a key weapon on their offense. Their offense is not going to be the same. That whole organization just seems to be in some sort of shambles. At the moment, not as bad as, some other organizations, but because they have a winning records, solid quarterback. But, Bill O'Brien's pretty clueless. So I don't know why he would want to go there, but, I think at this point in time, it's just going to be, I don't know. How could the Cowboys sign him? How could the Cowboys get him? They haven't even figured out what they want to do with Dak Prescott. They haven't signed his contract. It would be a horrible, horrible, horrible look for them to trade for Jamal Adams, sign his extension, get that done before Dak Prescott's deal gets done. That'd be the nail in the coffin. If that happened, Dak Prescott's gone after next season. I think you could probably guarantee it. They wanted Jamal Adams. They tried for him, but I guess the Cowboys could make it work, but I just don't see how you justify going out, spending a ton of draft capital and a ton of money on Jamal Adams when Dak Prescott has been waiting for so long for this contract extension. He's your quarterback. He's more valuable than a safety. It's insane. But again, I will say that who's paying 2 first-round picks for Jamal Adams? But I do want to give my opinion on this. I 100% support this move by him. I think, his time in New York has run its course. If they haven't gotten a deal done with him, they don't necessarily want him, or they're trying to sort of snake him and get him for cheap. Not pay as much as they should for him, because I guess at this point in time, he deserves to be one of the, if not the highest paid safety in the league, right? It's one of those things, from market value, then basically the next guy to get his extension becomes the highest paid in the league. While he is not the best, it's not always the best guys that are the highest paid guys in the league. So I guess, you could justify him being the highest paid in the league for now. But like I was saying, the New York Jets culture, that franchise, it's defunct. I don't understand what they're doing. They're not a winning culture. They're not a winning team. When I watch them play, I don't feel like that team can actually do anything. And that's no disrespect to the players at all. It's just, they're not in the right place right now. Adam Gase, to me, was not the right coaching hire. Didn't agree with it when they got him. You watch the offense play. They have Le'Veon Bell, and he can't get past, 3 yards every time he touches the ball. It's just a very sad team. Sam Darnold's still seeing ghosts. And they just don't have a winning culture. And I think he's a guy who wants to sort of instill that winning culture into that team, but the team and franchise doesn't want him to be the guy who does it, right? And so they're just on different wavelengths right now. And I think he does need to go to a different team. But ultimately, if I had to give my prediction, he's going to stay on the Jets. Because I don't know if any of these teams are going to make that move. I really don't know, which one of these teams is going to want to spend that much money on Jamal Adams plus the draft picks. I mean, I know I keep repeating it, but you have to understand, Jamal, I don't think if we go down this list of teams, right? Baltimore Ravens, Dallas Cowboys, Houston Texans, Kansas City Chiefs, Philadelphia Eagles, San Fran, Seattle Seahawks. If you put Jamal Adams onto any of those teams, do you say that that's what they need to push them over the edge to win the Super Bowl? Kansas City, of course, they're great, but they just won the Super Bowl, right? Right now, they're sitting pretty. Is Jamal Adams the difference between a Super Bowl and not a Super Bowl for any of these teams? I'm not sure. Right? I'm just not sure that he'd be a difference maker that much for any of these teams, or be the X factor that, Tyrann Mathieu came in to Kansas City. Of course, I have to reference my Chiefs. Tyrann Mathieu came in, changed life in Kansas City, changed the culture of that defense, instilled that championship swagger mindset. He's got the cool nickname, the landlord, the swagger about him. He brought swagger and attitude to the defense along with Frank Clark, Clark the Shark. I don't think that any of these teams, I don't think Jamal Adams comes in and does that for any of these teams and leads them to a Super Bowl. This is Super Bowl price. 2 first-round picks and a mega extension is, you're paying for a Super Bowl X factor. So, I really don't know where he goes. I do like the Philadelphia Eagles fit. I like the Dallas Cowboys in terms of fit, but I don't think it should happen. The Ravens, gosh, I don't need them to get any more ridiculous. But I don't think they make the move either. I think, they want to be smart with their future and their draft picks. They know that they need to structure this team around Lamar Jackson. To give up 2 first-round picks for them right now, don't think that is wise. San Fran or Seattle doesn't make sense to me either. Now, Houston Texans, sorry, I forgot. I was looking at the list. He just shouldn't go there. I think that'd be a waste. It'd be ridiculous for them, making all these ridiculous trades and then going out and paying all this money when they didn't want to pay DeAndre Hopkins, or it was sort of the one of the reasons for him being traded, of course, among other pretty bad things. But so this is something we're definitely going to keep our eyes on and our ears open for. But I feel bad for him because I have a feeling he'll stay on the Jets because the asking price is just way too high. If he starts to hold out, then he'll have a ton of leverage and they'll get rid of him. I think this is definitely a situation where if he doesn't get it, no one wants to pay that for him. He's holding out eventually, and then, he's out of New York. But there's no way Jamal Adams stays a Jet his whole career. And I think it'd be better for both sides if that happens, because I can't imagine that he is a, sunshine in the locker room. So with that, guys, let's get into our break, our second break of the day. And when we get back, we're going to talk about the coronavirus incidents that have been plaguing the league recently. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back after this.
Check out the show that's built on the MMA. From the UFC to extreme cage fighting, they got the fights covered. Check out the GSMC MMA podcast. Get the latest news on past or upcoming fights. Join us as we talk to and about some of the biggest names in the MMA, past, present, and future. When it's the fight game, there's just one show to check out. GSMCpodcast.com/MMA-podcast. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
guys, we are back, and right now, of course, because it just seems inevitable at this point, or every week I should say, we have to talk about COVID-19. It sounds disgusting saying it, like COVID-19, it just sounds gross, man, I hate it. Ugh, COVID-19, I'll just call it coronavirus for now, because I at least can, get that out without feeling disgusting. It has been reported that I think it was at least one person, 10 NFL teams basically have reported that at least one person or player at their facilities has contracted the coronavirus. Not good. Not good. Now, the only good thing that I can talk about here is that the NFL hasn't shown signs that they're backing down from the original stance of, they want to have the 2020 season, they want to start on time, all that good stuff. But, man, this is not looking the best. If I do have to, comment on it. Now, Dr. Anthony Fauci, he's basically been the face of this whole fight against coronavirus. He stated that football may not happen this year. He basically said, these football teams have to follow the NBA model of being in a bubble, which is, that's fine for me. I don't know how the players feel about that, but that's not good. It's not, doesn't make me very hopeful. Right, because, Dr. Anthony Fauci is an expert. This is what he does for a living. He knows much more about it than any NFL exec or owner or GM or CEO or, you know what I mean? So, or Roger Goodell. And so, yes, it's great that they want the season to happen. Excuse me. And their attitude is, work full speed ahead. We want to start this season. We're going to be safe, do what we need to start the season on time and have it here for the fans. They don't ultimately get to just make that decision. Right, there's a lot that goes into these decisions, especially something like this that is so big, impacting the world. It's very concerning that so many people are contracting this virus. When it's seemingly everyone. Remember, I was talking about it. I think it was just last episode. I was talking about or the episode before that, how with all the social unrest that's going on, the peaceful protests and all that, fighting. The fight out there for equality, it seems that people have sort of forgotten that coronavirus has existed. Coronavirus has certainly sort of dipped down in the relevance meter, and it shouldn't have, right? It's still very, very important. I just, I go to the grocery store because, of course, everyone needs groceries. And, I was actually just there today. And, when I'm there nowadays, way more people are not practicing social distancing. Many more people don't care to have their mask fully covering their face, which to me is very, very odd. Why wear the mask if you're not going to cover your full nose or mouth? That defeats the purpose of the mask. And, the stores are much more lenient. They're not wiping down my cart as I walk in like they used to. They're not counting the people and limiting how many people are coming into the store. A lot of things feel much more normal now, except, we just have to have a mask on. And for some people, barely even that. And so it sort of makes sense that now there is this sweep of cases impacting the NFL, and it's not going to stop there. I think we're going to see many more teams, report cases of coronavirus, And, we saw, the Cowboys and Texans, they had players or staff. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers announced that they also had several players that tested positive for coronavirus. And so it's getting very, very sketchy. And, this is why, I was saying previously, people need to take this seriously. Players need to be role models in this, and they need to take this very, very seriously. You need to not be linking up with your friends or your teammates, these workouts with, 6-7 people when, we weren't supposed to be out and about. that was very concerning to me, because if that was the attitude of these people thinking they're invincible, they're going to ruin the season for everyone. And so now this really doesn't help out. The NFL Players Association has, they sent out a message, like they're like basically begging teams not to have, they're asking all these players to stop having these private workouts, stop meeting up with their teammates to work out, practice, et cetera, et cetera. And so, they want to take the measures, every measure possible to stop this. Now, of course, they can't, they're not forcing these players not to do these things, but it's just these players need to heed these warnings, right? It's just, it sucks. It sucks because, I had a feeling that this was coming. Had a feeling a bunch of people in the NFL would get the coronavirus, and now, it was revealed that, along with, the Cowboys and the Texans players that got, diagnosed with the coronavirus, there were 49ers players that were also, there working out with a group of teammates. They were working out in Nashville, They reportedly tested, so one of them reportedly tested positive for COVID-19, and apparently the entire group included Jimmy Garoppolo. And so it's all very, very crazy. It stinks that it's happening right now. But, at this point, we have to keep moving forward, being responsible, all of us, not just the football players. And, I brought up the Jimmy Garoppolo thing because, we haven't really seen, and I'm not trying to say, this is, when someone gets coronavirus, it means less if someone more important, quote unquote, more important gets it. But we haven't seen, some sort of big name quarterback who's the face of a franchise, leader of the team, come down with the virus. And so, should a lot of, more stars, more leaders of teams, quarterbacks start contracting the virus, I think the hope for the season's start is certainly going to dwindle, and dwindle very, very fast. I hope the league takes measures to stop this. I just really, I know that it's sort of been the whole idea of the bubble has sort of been shot down by the NFL, and they think that they can control it. They think that anyone who has the virus, they'll quarantine them as necessary, and they'll do what they can to stop the spread. But I have a feeling that that's sort of lack of caution, because you can never be too cautious. You know what I mean? Well, I guess technically you could come up with some scenario where you're too cautious, but I'm just saying, you get what I'm trying to say. With this sort of thing, the more cautious you are, the better. Of course, we're not going to have the logic of, our president, in which, some people think, the way to have less cases is to test less people. Sorry, just had to throw that jab in there. But, the league has to take steps necessary no matter what the money says. Because if you don't, you're not going to have a season at all, and you're going to lose much more money than you would have had you been super, super safe. Right? And so at the end of the day, if you present, owners, all these people, they're businessmen, right? You present these businessmen with these options, you take this risk to make your proper money, but you have the potential to lose it all and not have a season, or you take a season with losses. And I understand that has implications on the salary cap, all that, etc. But the world needs football. And I know that's very biased to me. Of course, there are people out there that could care less for football, American football. But right now, the world needs sports. The world needs to watch their favorite players go out and do what they do on the courts, the fields, the wrestling mats, the boxing rings, the octagons. We need our athletes. We need, our role models and our favorite players and stars to do what they do, because, it's been a rough time for the world, honestly. And so, I just want everything to get back to normal. I know, I said it a while back, it's going to get worse before it gets better. It got a lot worse. And I'm just hoping we can get to that steady uphill climb, and get back, and have sports back sooner rather than later. But I understand, if this is just, there's been talks of the second wave coming of coronavirus. These teams need to put that before making money. And I understand, the implications of making less money, but we have to have a football season. Players need to be responsible. Owners need to be responsible. And there needs to be, I think, like I said before, there needs to be punishment in place for those who aren't following these guidelines. This is something that's super important. I think, not having, sort of disciplinary measures in place for this sort of stuff is why, some players have been less cautious about it. And I'm not saying, that's of course, putting rules in place doesn't, just automatically stop everyone from doing something, but it would definitely have the players have more caution because they're putting the league at risk, right? It's not just, when players were smoking weed or, something like that, breaking the rules like that, they do that to themselves, right? And that affects them mostly individually. But this, being reckless with the coronavirus, not practicing social distancing, not being hygienic, not, disinfecting properly, or just being irresponsible around, crowds of people or in public, that could possibly be the downfall of an entire league season. So it doesn't take much to spread. One person turns to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, 32, 32 to 64, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It keeps going and it gets the exponential growth. You can infect hundreds of people from one interaction. And so, players have to realize this. People at the facilities need to realize this. I agree with the NFL Players Association. I really need to, I think the teams really need to start implementing strict rules about this on their players. No private meetups right now. No private workouts. Only by yourself or with people who live with you, very close to you, your trainer, whatever, with masks, it's sanitizer, all that good stuff. Because, no risks need to be taken. Not right now. Not right now. What's, most important right now is the preservation of the league, preservation of the season. Without the league, it's not even just that. We don't have a show for you guys. Right? Without the league, there's no fantasy football. I can't wake up every morning, look at my lineup, make sure it's set all good, get that excitement for the day, watch my team smoke someone, win by 50 points, call it a day, get excited for the waiver wires to hit, So, we need that magic. I need that fantasy football magic in my life, of course. And I'm just, I'm asking all my players, NFL, anyone connected to the NFL at all listening, please be responsible, be safe. You're not invincible. I know you might feel that way on that football field, but you are not invincible. You can get this just like anybody else can. We just need to be safe. So hopefully, I'm hoping, this doesn't spread to, many more players. I know we're going to hear more teams and more players come out and say that, they tested positive for the virus. It seems inevitable at this point, but I'm hoping this will slow down. And it's not even just, let me put my selfish reasons aside, for the football, for the entertainment. Let me put that aside. This virus kills people. So many people have passed away because of this virus, and that's actually the sad reality of this thing. You can see all the memes you want, make all the jokes about it you want, the Cardi B, coronavirus, all that stuff, but this is actually really serious, and it's bigger than football. So, at the end of the day, if the league doesn't have the season, they deem it, too unsafe. Of course, I would understand, but it would be the biggest bummer. But of course, I would understand because people's lives are at risk, and at the end of the day, we cannot be putting players' lives at risk. And I hope that these players are, thinking about that, because I think a lot of people right now, especially, are, they're downplaying the virus. Everybody's gotten back to that mode where, it's just a virus like the flu. I can handle it. I can survive it. But other people can't. Right? And so, and some people just have complications from it and they'll end up passing away. We definitely do not want that to happen or need that to happen. It can be prevented. So hopefully, they take the proper course of action, get this all settled and straight, and we can have an NFL football season. So with that, guys, we're going to end this segment. It's concerning, alarming. The NFLPA is getting involved, telling these players not to have private workouts, which I'm all for. Hopefully it doesn't have to get deeper than that. The NFL's attitude on it is still the same. They want to have the season. They don't feel it's dire right now, but I hope, they don't end up with their foot in their mouth, and they take the action when it's time to, and learn from the United States' mistakes, and don't end up, like us, unprepared, not ready when you had plenty of time to prepare for it. So, with that, guys, we'll go into our break. When we get back, we're going to talk about some handcuffs for fantasy football. That might be interesting. So stay tuned, guys. Yes, we're talking fantasy football in the show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after this.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back. We are in our final segment of today's show, and for this segment, guys, I want to talk about some interesting handcuffs that you guys should most certainly be paying attention to for fantasy football's sake. Just because injuries happen all the time, and I don't want to, of course, I'm not wishing injury on anyone, but handcuffs are very, very important. And if you can get ahead of everyone else and have some of these handcuffs, it just might win you your league. Not even kidding, because waiver wires can really be stressful. If you're in excuse me, I'm talking to my guys who are in 12, my guys and gals who are in 12-person leagues. Oof, the waiver wire is rough there, and if you're not doing some people do their waiver wires based on money. You have a certain budget allotted to you the entire season. When you spend that money does not come back. You spend money on free agents every week. Whoever has the highest bid, they get the player. Now, I would assume, most leagues aren't doing that. I don't do that quite very often. I have participated in leagues that do that. Just to get my thoughts on it, I thought it was interesting. The reason I don't do it is because, and especially, in the 12-person leagues, because sometimes people will pay ridiculous amounts of money for one player, below their whole budget for the whole season. And one, not that, of course, you might say, okay, that person's just silly, let them do that, whatever. The reason why is because I do the best in my leagues. I try to do my best to limit sort of behavior like that. It's sort of league ruining behavior, because then you got a guy who's just silly or doesn't know what he's doing, or just wants to be that guy, thinks it's funny. He wastes all his budget in the first week or first 2 weeks, but then you see that gives other people advantages, right? Because it's one less person to compete against for the waiver wires that week. So I don't necessarily like it. One reason I don't like it too is because that feeling, of not getting that player by $1 is horrible. No, but to be real, the one thing I don't like about it is that, stacked teams can constantly be getting players. Stacked teams can get, the first crack at the, top waiver wire pickups, and just get even more strong. So, that's why I don't necessarily like the whole budget system, because, should, this guy just get, make good bids on players. He always bids $1 more than someone. He'll get the player. And of course it's a blind bid. You don't get to see what others are bidding until, you get the player. But it's a way that, teams who are high ranked top teams in the league can keep dominating and keep getting great waiver wire pickups. So that's why I don't really do it, but it's not all horrible. Okay. The first handcuff I want to talk about is one that I think, it's still crazy to me that this guy is a handcuff, because he has the potential, he has a talent and the potential to be a starter. This is Kareem Hunt of the Cleveland Browns. Now, Nick Chubb isn't going anywhere. Nick Chubb is an absolute beast. Nick Chubb's awesome. Nick Chubb's great. You guys all know how much I love him. But Kareem Hunt was an absolute beast when he was a starter for Kansas City. In his first season, he averaged 15.1 fantasy points a game. In his second season, of course, before the suspension, you guys know what happened. 18.6 fantasy points per game. And last season, as the backup for the Cleveland Browns, he averaged 8 fantasy points a game. He only played in, I believe it was 8 or 9 games. Ended up with like 65, off the top of 60-some fantasy points total, but he missed most of the season. Let's remember that he came in honestly, I think it was week 10 he came back in because of the way the bye week landed after his suspension. But he ended with 37 receptions on 44 targets, 285 yards receiving, 1 receiving touchdown, 2 rushing touchdowns, and he had 4.2 yards per carry. Now, I just want to note that in those 8 games with the Cleveland Browns, he had more receptions than he had in his 11 games last season or the season prior with the Kansas City Chiefs. In 3 less games, he had 11 more receptions and 11 more targets, and 9 more targets. So Kareem Hunt figures to be a big part of the passing offense in Cleveland. I think, he's very impressive as a receiver. He can do it all. He has the power to truck through someone, but he has that finesse. He has the route running. He has the hands for it. So he is clearly the number 2 running back on that team, clearly the primary pass-catching running back. I think, having him in the whole season, new coach, they're going to want to run that one. I think running that 1-2 punch is going to be very, very useful. We saw the Eagles do it and go win the Super Bowl doing it. I think it's a very good way to keep your running back fresh, especially a running back like Nick Chubb who can just bulldoze through people, and is a power kind of guy. Of course, he has the speed, but he has power. It also keeps him off the field, for the injury concerns. So pay attention to Kareem Hunt, guys. I think he's going to be the top handcuff next year for fantasy football, because I think as a backup, even he can end up giving you some solid fantasy football points. They can end up, he's not Alvin Kamara, but they can end up like the Alvin Kamara, Mark Ingram sort of duo. So pay attention to Kareem Hunt. He is certainly going to be worth drafting in a lot of your leagues. So pay attention to Kareem Hunt. And I'll just say, he certainly is one of my favorite running backs. Don't agree, with the off-field stuff, but it is what it is. It happened. He paid for it, certainly. Of course, I'm not going to get into that. Not going to get into that here. But because I know, a lot of people think he should have lost his. He lost his job and his position in the NFL. I'm not going to give my opinion on it, regardless. But anyway, we move on. Sorry, guys. Another one to pay attention to him because he showed that he can get it. Latavius Murray, the New Orleans Saints. Now, I don't expect him, of course, because I'm not expecting every year for, running backs to get injured or a specific running back to get injured again. But when Alvin Kamara was hurt, Latavius Murray came out and showed out a bit. And I think it sort of made us believe that he was going to sort of carve out a bigger role when Kamara came back. That didn't end up happening. But he only started in 8 games, ended up with 123 fantasy points. I like that. I like that a lot, actually, and I think, should something happen to Alvin Kamara, he can certainly be a top fantasy football running back. Last season he had 140 total yards twice in week 7 and 8. He had 637 yards, 5 TDs on 146 carries. He's one of those, I think there's different echelons to these handcuffs, right? Where you see a guy who, he's going to get the work if a guy gets injured just because he's the backup. But guys like Kareem Hunt, Latavius Murray, the talent is there already. We know that they can do it. We know that they're capable of being that every down sort of back, and they have the talent to sort of carve out a starting role, basically be a 1B sort of running back should the 1A get hurt. So Latavius Murray is another very, very interesting one to keep your eyes on. Super low ADP, definitely worth the pick if, worth stashing. These are guys worth stashing. Kareem Hunt could probably give you points on a week-to-week basis, RB, low-end RB2, RB3 kind of guy, because I'm sure he'll get, receiving touchdowns quite often. And if you're in a PPR league, a guy like Kareem Hunt's going to be very, very valuable. But Latavius Murray, definitely going to get some hype on draft day, I think, also because guys who picked him up on the waiver wire, he performed for very, very solidly. I think he actually had a game. I'm trying to remember. He had a huge game. I think he had about 30 points in a game. I'm trying to remember who they were playing. He had a game where he had 30 or close to 30 points in fantasy football, and I know people were going wild for that. And I know he had some other games that were pretty solid as well. I don't think, he wasn't blowing, the tops off of people every week, but he had a couple solid weeks where he was definitely scoring over 25 points. I think it was a string of two or three games, something like that, where he had 25 plus. Sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head, but I do know that he had a couple games over 25 points. So keep your eyes on Latavius Murray, guys, and a high-powered offense. Super, super solid. All right. The next one I want to talk about here, certainly an interesting one because I think a lot of people he sort of got forgotten. Chase Edmonds of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, when Chase Edmonds had filled in for David Johnson, he was pretty productive, and I think he basically just once Kenyon Drake came in and exploded onto the scene, it was over for Chase Edmonds, right? But I think, Chase Edmonds has shown what he can do. I think he's definitely the number 2 wide receiver. He can see work in the pass game. So again, PPR kind of handcuff here to pay attention to. And I think that's going to be a high-powered offense next season where we can see him steal several touchdowns off, a little screen here and there. Kenyon Drake goes off the field for rest real quick. Chase Edmonds, he has the speed, he has the playmaking ability. We've seen it happen, right? And in 2019, on 60 carries, he had 303 yards and 4 touchdowns. So he's a very productive runner of the football. We just have to see him in a full season where he's not getting absolutely destroyed by the Kenyon Drake hype. I think this is one where we're going to see an evolution of this offense for sure. With the addition of DeAndre Hopkins, Kenyon Drake being the full-time starter, but Chase Edmonds had really, really good games, and he had a huge game in Week 7 with 33 fantasy football points against the New York Giants. 27 carries, 126 yards, 3 TDs on the ground, 2 catches for 24 yards. So, and the week after that, he had 12.7. Week after that, 14.6. Those are solid days, too. Of course, they're not, RB1 numbers, but we saw his RB1 number potential at 33 points right there. So, keep your eyes on Chase Edmonds as a handcuff. I think he could be very, very valuable for where you're going to be drafting him. Now, the last person I want to talk about here is one that's very, very interesting and I think could be a surprise to a lot of people. Anthony McFarland of the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this is a rookie. It's the only rookie I'll talk about today. Of course, I'll talk about more handcuffs as, we move along here. But, getting closer to the season. But I think he's going to carve out his role as the number 2 behind James Conner. Now, we have talked about on the show here, and we've seen, there's been a little bit of drama surrounding James Conner. I wouldn't say actually drama, but, the Steelers aren't sure if that's the guy they want to run with, for the future, for the long haul. James Conner hasn't necessarily carved out his role as, the franchise running back for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's had some trouble staying healthy. Now, he did have that awesome season, but last season he only had 464 yards. He did have 4 yards a carry, but it's nowhere near as good. He had 973 season before that on 4.5 yards a carry with 12 TDs. He had 4 TDs last season, only 464 yards, and only 4 yards a carry. Now, the 4 yards a carry is not horrible, but the top backs in the league are certainly over 4, some by significant margins. Now, the reason why I like Anthony McFarland is because he has great speed. He had one of the top times for his position at the combine for the 40-yard dash. I believe it was 4.44. People have compared him to Jamal Charles, and if he can have that sort of versatility of Jamal Charles, he's going to be a beast. I don't know if a lot of you know who Jamal Charles is. Let me fill you in. He's one of the best running backs to ever play the game. I believe he has the highest yards per carry, career yards per carry ever, and I think he definitely deserves a spot in the Hall. He career shortened by injuries, sadly, but he was an awesome running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, and if Anthony McFarland can be anything like Jamal Charles, then he's certainly going to be a beast. So I like him. I think he definitely should be ranked higher than Jalen Samuels, Benny Snell on your list. I believe his ADP is actually higher than those two, just because a lot of people rookies get a lot of love, especially ones that are quick playmakers, because of the potential. Even though we haven't seen them play on the field yet, we believe in their potential. So pay attention to Anthony McFarland, guys. I think he could be very, very productive, especially if James Conner gets hurt again. We saw him struggle with the health issues, and I'm not wishing injury on him at all, of course not, but he could get hurt again. He struggled with some health issues, and Anthony McFarland could carve out a role in that Steelers offense. So pay attention to him. Now with that, guys, I want to say thank you for listening to today's show, the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to ask that you follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, guys, and leave a comment. Let us know what you love. Let us know what you hate, and of course, keep it constructive. I want to just let you guys know too, or just ask you guys to stay safe out there, guys. Wear your face masks. Keep practicing social distancing, no matter how frustrating it may be. To have to deal with this for so long. Stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy, guys. Have a good night, and we'll see you here next time.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.